I'm Lisa Marie Peterson, 48 years old, and this February, I died on a hospital floor for 22 minutes. I've been an oncology nurse for over 20 years at a busy hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. My life was normal, predictable, even. It was my husband, Mark, our teenage son, Josh, and me. Our world revolved around Josh's soccer schedule, paying the mortgage, and trying to find time for a date night once a month. Lisa Marie Peterson had lived her life in the rhythm of a nurse's shift. Early mornings, late nights, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the scent of antiseptic never leaving her clothes. She was 48, steady in her work, steady in her family, steady in her faith, or so she thought. On a February afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, the hum of routine cracked open like fragile glass. She had been pouring a cup of stale coffee, grumbling in her mind about being 30 minutes late for her break, when her hand tingled, pins and needles racing up her arm. A sudden crushing weight pressed into her chest. She knew the signs. She had seen countless patients collapse just like this. She wanted to call out, but no sound would come. Her knees gave way. Her last earthly thought was of her son, Josh, and the foolish argument that morning about his video games. She had left him in anger. A single tear rolled down her cheek before the hospital floor rushed up to meet her. Silence followed. Not the silence of sleep, not the silence of anesthesia. It was the silence of a sudden severing, as if the cord tethering her to the world had been cut. She felt no more pain. She felt no fear. She felt only release. When she opened her eyes again, she was not lying on the floor. She was hovering above it, weightless. The room was a blur of chaos below her. She saw Megan, her friend and fellow nurse, rushing in, screaming her name. She watched the chest compressions, the crash cart rolling in, the paddles pressed to her chest. She heard clear, and saw her body jolt with electricity. It should have been terrifying, but she was calm, detached, as if she were watching a familiar movie unfold. Her training, her years of experience, all of it whispered recognition. She was clinically dead. Her body was failing, but she was more alive than ever. She looked at her colleagues, her friends, and a deep love swelled in her. She thought of Mark, her husband, who would soon get a phone call that would break him. She thought of Josh, her teenage boy, who would crumble under the news. And yet she felt strangely unburdened. Her body was no longer her. She was lighter. She was herself in a truer sense than she had ever known. Then came the pull. Gentle at first, like a soft tide tugging at her ankles, then stronger, insistent. The hospital room faded. The bright lights dimmed to velvet darkness, not the suffocating kind but warm, enveloping, like sinking into the safest embrace. She wasn't falling. She wasn't drifting. She was being guided. A peace deeper than any rest she had ever tasted filled her. For the first time in years, she was not a nurse, not a wife, not a mother bound to schedules and bills and fatigue. She was simply a soul in waiting. There was stillness, like standing in a midnight field under an infinite sky. Ahead, a pinprick of light shimmered. It pulsed like a star. She stared, and it grew, expanding, drawing nearer, brighter. But it wasn't just light. It was alive, humming with a love that reached into her core, pulling every hidden thought, every regret, every memory into its embrace. She had seen many things in her years as a nurse, life entering the world, life leaving it, but she had never known love like this. Her earthly time ticked away on hospital monitors, hands pressing her chest, voices shouting her name. But she no longer belonged to that clock. She was being carried into something eternal. The star ahead was no longer a speck. It swelled like dawn breaking through the longest night. Lisa felt herself moving, though there were no steps, no wings, no effort. The closer she came, the more the darkness shifted, not into menace but into comfort, like a velvet backdrop making the light even more radiant. The air, if it could be called air, hummed with something alive. It was not oxygen filling lungs. It was love saturating her being, seeping into every forgotten place, softening every wound. The light grew wider, until it enveloped everything. It was warm, golden white, but unlike any sunlight she had known. Sunlight cast shadows. This light erased them. It searched her without interrogation, exposing without humiliating. She felt completely known, and the knowing itself was love. Her years of quick car prayers, her rushed words at the bedside of a dying patient, her fatigue that sometimes left her short with her husband or son, all of it appeared before her, and none of it condemned her. She felt weight lifting, shame unraveling, guilt dissolving into a tide too strong to resist. Lisa remembered the countless times she had walked into patients' rooms and whispered a prayer under her breath, doubting if God was listening. Now she knew. He had always been listening. Every hurried word, every weary sigh, collected, cherished. She realized something that pierced her. Even the tears she shed in secret were never unseen. They were stored, like diamonds, in the presence of the one who held her now. She floated closer until the light had form. The brilliance softened, revealing outline, then shape, then presence. It was a man, robed in white, so dazzling it seemed woven from the light itself. She could not see his face at first, the brightness was too great. But she knew. Her soul recognized before her mind caught up. And when his eyes lifted to hers, it was not color she saw, but liquid love, endless, bottomless, drawing her in. It was Jesus. The realization hit her not with thunder, but with softness, like a child finally spotting her father in a crowded place. Relief coursed through her. She was not lost. She was not adrift. She was found. His eyes told her what no sermon, no hymn, no scripture had ever fully conveyed. She was known completely, and still she was wanted. Tears spilled, not from sadness, but from joy so uncontainable it overflowed. She felt herself drop to her knees, not because she had to, but because she could not help it. The ground, or whatever she stood on, welcomed her surrender. Jesus extended a hand, glowing with a soft radiance. He didn't need to touch her, yet she felt his touch ripple through her, healing unseen fractures. In that moment, she realized something that would stay with her forever. He was not distant. He was not the God she had pictured as a grandfather in another country, far off and busy. He was here, closer than her own breath, looking into her with eyes that knew every scar and still shone with delight. The peace was indescribable. It was not mere silence. It was harmony, like every string in her soul had been tuned perfectly at once. She thought about her life, the scrubs she wore, the hurried meals, the unspoken exhaustion, the times she prayed and wondered if it mattered. And suddenly it did matter. It all mattered, because he had seen it. Every small act of compassion, every moment of weariness, every choice to love when no one applauded, recorded in the heart of the one standing before her. And she knew. This was only the beginning of what he was about to reveal. The radiance around him softened enough for her eyes to drink in his presence. Lisa felt both smaller than a grain of sand, and yet more treasured than a jewel in a king's crown. His gaze held her steady, like an anchor that reached deeper than memory or breath. She realized with an ache of awe that she didn't have to speak. He already knew. Every thought she had carried, every wound she had hidden, every prayer whispered into the void, all of it lay uncovered in his eyes. And yet, not one shadow of condemnation passed over his face. Only love, only acceptance, only delight in the fact that she was standing there before him. Her tears kept flowing, not the bitter kind, but tears that washed her clean, like a river spilling over stones and carrying away what didn't belong. She had spent years believing she was ordinary, a nurse with a tired smile, a wife trying to make ends meet, a mother who sometimes raised her voice too quickly. She thought those failures had defined her. Yet here, before him, she was defined by none of it. She was defined only by love. He moved closer, and though his robe glowed with unearthly brilliance, it didn't blind her. Instead, it wrapped her in warmth. You are not forgotten. His presence seemed to whisper into her bones. You are not unseen. She thought of the quiet moments she had spent holding a dying patient's hand when no one else was there. She thought of the times she had slipped an encouraging word to a frightened family. He was showing her those very moments, replaying them before her eyes, not with pride, but with gentle joy, as though he wanted her to know they had been recorded in heaven. Lisa wept harder, realizing that nothing had been wasted. The sighs she had let out in her car, the nights she cried into her pillow after a long shift, the silent acts of kindness. Every detail mattered. He saw them all. He had always seen them. For every moment she thought she was alone, she had never been. Then something even deeper poured through her, unworthiness. She felt the weight of her impatience, her small judgments, her hurried prayers that were more habit than heart. She thought of the argument with Josh, the morning she brushed off her husband, the time she had doubted God's nearness. It all rose before her like a tide threatening to drown her. She trembled, certain now that she would see disappointment in his eyes. But when she dared to look up again, it wasn't disappointment she found. It was compassion. Jesus reached out his hand. He didn't even need to touch her, and the shame melted. The weight dissolved. He saw her flaws, yes, but he saw beyond them. He saw the heart beneath, the heart that had loved even in weakness. She felt him say without words, I see your love. I see your tears. I see you. A warmth surged into her chest. Her unworthiness was replaced by joy so profound it remade her. She was no longer a nurse in scrubs, no longer a body lying lifeless on a hospital floor. She was a beloved child, welcomed home. She breathed in that truth. not through lungs, but through spirit. It was richer than oxygen, filling places she hadn't known were hollow. For a moment that might have been eternity, there was nothing but this communion, this gaze, this unbreakable knowing. The universe itself could have crumbled, and she would not have cared. She was safe in the center of love himself. But then, in his eyes, she caught a shift, a shadow of sorrow, not for her, but for something beyond. His gaze, though still tender, carried weight. There was more he wanted her to see. There was more he needed to reveal. What came next unfolded like a slow sunrise over water, the kind of light that doesn't shout, but keeps arriving until it is everywhere. Lisa felt him draw near with the calm of a tide that knows exactly where the shore is. The sorrow she had seen in his eyes was not for her. It was for a world that kept forgetting love. And then he turned the focus back to her small life, as if to say that heaven measures greatness by the scale of the heart. You feel this in your own chest right now, the way you lean closer without moving, the way your breathing grows quiet when tenderness walks in. Scenes opened around her, not as harsh spotlights, but as warm lanterns. A dim hospital corridor where she had stood longer than her chart required, listening to a frightened daughter ask if her mother would suffer. The break room where she had written a note of encouragement to a nurse who was thinking of quitting. The parking lot where she had offered a blanket to a homeless man on a winter night and then worried it wasn't enough. Each memory glowed with a soft edge, as if the simple act of care had wrapped itself in light. She realized that heaven had kept receipts of love, that nothing kind disappears. The main feeling swelling through her was affirmation, not the brittle kind that flatters, but the deep assurance that who she had tried to be in secret was seen. She stood in that awareness as though the ground beneath her were slowly rising to meet her feet. Years of second-guessing loosened their grip. She had believed that love only counted when it was big and loud. Yet what she saw now was a constellation of small mercies, and each one sang. A brush of fragrance passed her, like crushed rosemary, and something warmer she could not name, and it filled her with an ache that felt like homecoming. You can almost smell it too if you let your mind be still, the way a childhood kitchen clings to your memory not for the recipe, but for the belonging. Sensory details folded into her. The hush of that other country, the way light felt like satin against the spirit, the faint vibration under everything that hinted at music too whole for instruments. She recognized it as praise that never tires. He let her perceive a simple truth as a tidbit tucked into the splendor. Heaven does not grade love by quantity, but by cost to the self. A hand held when you are late. A calm voice when you want to snap. A prayer offered when no one will ever know you prayed. She understood with a clarity that hurt and healed at once. Love is the only currency that crosses the border of death with value intact. Shame tried one last time to argue its case. The morning she'd rushed past Mark's attempt at conversation, the impatient tone with a patient who would not stop pressing the call button, the quiet envy she'd felt for a younger colleague who seemed to carry no fatigue. But the arguments grew faint as light poured through them. Her failures did not vanish. They were rethreaded into a larger tapestry where repentance had already been woven. She could see it now, how sorrow, acknowledged and turned, becomes a door rather than a wall. The joy that replaced her shame was not giddy. It was settled, the way a lake settles after wind. You move along with her, as if you're being walked through your own hallway of memories. Somewhere inside, a question rises. Do the small things in my life matter? The answer meets you in a hush that feels like a nod. They matter when love is the engine. They matter when no one knows your name. They matter because the one who keeps time by hearts was there. Lisa found herself remembering the times she had felt invisible. The staff party where she stood near the coffee urn while conversation skipped around her. The performance review where her supervisor praised outcomes but could not name the names she knew by heart. She had carried a quiet ache that her life would never be significant. In this light, insignificance evaporated like mist. The faces of the forgotten stood shining. Their dignity was not borrowed. It was original, placed there by the Maker. She realized that in heaven the unnoticed become a kind of royalty, not above others, but radiant with the dignity of service. That simple revelation settled into her like a seed promised to become a tree. Another gentle form of love brushed past, the sensation of warm linen between her fingers, as if she were folding sheets for a patient who would never see her. That was how heaven held memory, by texture, by temperature, by tenderness. She could feel the cool of an ice cup she had held to parched lips, could hear the soft clicking of a medication pump as though it were a metronome for compassion. Each sensory thread tugged on something within her and rewove it tighter, kinder. There was no scoreboard here, no chart where she could tally points. There was only truth, and truth felt kind. Even where she had missed the mark, kindness stepped first. She remembered a night when she'd turned out her bedside lamp, and told herself she would pray tomorrow. In this place, tomorrow arrived, and prayer wrapped back around that night like a shawl arriving late, but still warming the shoulders. Time, she realized, behaves differently where love reigns. Earth's clocks measure seconds, heaven measures surrender. Her attention shifted with a softness she did not control. Without words, she understood that affirmation was not permission to drift. It was a summons. The same love that healed her was also commissioning her. She felt it like the gentle pressure a mother's palm places on a child's back when it is time to step forward. You know this feeling. Not a shove, not even a push, just a steadying touch that says, go on. In the distance, if distance exists where everything is near, she sensed a horizon. It was bright but not blinding, and she recognized it as the place where purpose appears. Before she could ask for it, a memory surfaced of her patient Robert, the older man whose pain she had managed earlier that day. She saw him again, but now she saw through the clinical data into an interior landscape. The way fear had shrunk his courage, the way loneliness had chewed the edges of his hope. She realized that every diagnosis carried a soul story, and that the truest medicine begins where the chart ends. The awareness settled as another small item of knowledge. Bodies can be stabilized, but souls must be shepherded. The joy rising in her was not an escape from responsibility, it was fuel for it. Joy clarified. Joy steadied. Joy said that serving did not drain meaning, it delivered it. She felt almost buoyant with the recognition that her life had not been an accident of shifts and paychecks, but a designed assignment where heaven had been her witness all along. And that realization, carried like a lantern, would later change how she entered every room. She stood once more in that gaze that holds without trapping, examines without shaming. If love were touchable, this is how it would feel against the skin, warm, patient, unhurried. You let your shoulders drop a fraction, because somewhere in your own story you want this verdict to be true, that the quiet goodness you attempted, however flawed, was not lost. In the rhythm of this telling, your heart takes that hope like a sip of water. Lisa did not need words to say thank you. Gratitude moved through her like breath that never strains. The affirmation did not inflate her, it grounded her. She understood that to be seen rightly is to become more humble, not less, because there is nothing left to prove. The only thing left is to keep loving. Then, like a page turning itself, she felt that earlier sorrow reappear at the edges. Not a threat, but a warning preparing to reveal itself. The air held a hush that meant a door was about to open. She had been told she was loved. Now she would be shown why the world was shaking. Joy remained in her like a companion, steadying her for what she had to learn next. The sorrow in his eyes deepened, like the stillness of a sky before a storm. Lisa felt the shift before she saw it, the warmth of affirmation giving way to the weight of revelation. You know that feeling when a room changes, when laughter fades, and everyone senses a truth is about to be spoken. That is how the atmosphere grew around her, charged not with fear, but with solemn gravity. Jesus did not scold, yet the ache in his gaze told her this was not about her anymore. This was about the world she had left only moments ago, the world still spinning in its distractions and blindness. She felt him lift her vision, not upward, but outward, until it seemed she was standing on a balcony over the earth itself. Cities flickered beneath her like embers in the night. Voices rose like smoke, millions of them calling out, but most not to him. The sorrow became words without lips moving. Humanity has traded me for false stars. Lisa felt it pierce her. She saw the truth unraveling before her eyes. People looking upward, but not toward heaven. Their gaze was fixed on celebrities, on screens glowing in dark rooms, on politicians promising salvation, on billionaires claiming to hold the future. She watched as human hearts bent like worshippers, not before altars of stone, but before stages, stadiums, and digital idols. It broke her. She had been guilty of it herself. She remembered scrolling news feeds, knowing more about a singer's scandal than about her neighbor's pain. She remembered wishing for the easy life of wealth when her own bills pressed too hard. She had bowed her heart, in small ways, to the same idols now flickering before her. The main emotion swelling inside her was grief. Not her own, but his. It was holy sorrow, the kind that aches not because love is absent, but because love is refused. She saw how freely he had given himself, how patient his call had been, and how loudly humanity had turned up the volume of its distractions to drown him out. Then came the tidbit of understanding, delivered with the quiet precision of heaven's wisdom. Idols are not only statues in temples. They are anything that steals the gaze meant for God. They are careers that consume the soul, addictions polished to look like entertainment, pride disguised as progress. Lisa grasped that the danger wasn't just in the celebrities who stood on pedestals. It was in the hearts that placed them there. The vision sharpened. She saw millions of screens lighting up dark bedrooms, faces tilted toward them with reverence. She saw stadiums roaring not for victory, but for worship of flesh and fame. She saw entire nations bowing their economic and emotional weight before the powerful, trusting them to fix what only heaven could heal. And woven through it all, she saw the whisper of the enemy, subtle, patient, nudging hearts further from their creator while convincing them they were still in control. Lisa trembled. The grief of God soaked her spirit like rain. She thought of her own son, Josh, spending hours idolizing his video games, his heroes on the screen. She thought of herself, more worried about a mortgage payment than about kneeling in true surrender. It was not just the world. It was her family. It was her heart. Jesus' eyes never left hers. They did not rage. They pleaded. They held sorrow deep enough to drown in, yet mercy wide enough to rescue anyone who would turn back. Lisa knew what he was saying without words. Warn them. Tell them their worship is misplaced. Tell them that the stars they chase are burning out. The balcony faded, and she stood again before him, heavy with a grief that was not despair but urgency. Heaven had entrusted her with a warning, and she knew this was only the beginning of what he would show her. The vision unfolded before Lisa's eyes as if the earth itself had become a stage. At first, she saw a sea of people, tens of thousands pressed together, their hands raised high, their voices a roar that shook the air. It looked like worship, but it wasn't. The adoration was not for God, but for a man striding across a platform lit with fire and thunder. A famous musician, one whose face she recognized from television screens and magazine covers. The crowd screamed his name, as if their very breath belonged to him. Phones rose like torches, their blue glow flickering like false candles at an altar. Lisa felt the noise like a physical weight. The waves of human praise rolled toward the man, drenching him in power. He absorbed it, basked in it, stretching his arms wide as if to drink it deeper. For a fleeting moment, she saw the charm, the charisma, the talent that had made him a star. But Jesus allowed her to look beyond the stage. What she saw hollowed her. Behind the curtain of fame, the man's heart was a cavern. Empty, dark. He stood in a vast, cold mansion with marble floors and high ceilings. But it felt colder than any hospital corridor at midnight. Bottles lined his countertops. Not medicine, not healing, but poison masquerading as relief. Faces of people he had used drifted by, discarded like broken instruments. He had millions of admirers, but not one true friend. Fame had become his prison. Lisa's chest ached as she realized he was drowning in the very sea of applause that the world envied. The cheers outside were chains inside. She saw him alone, weeping in silence after shows, his eyes bloodshot, his soul starved. She had thought once that celebrities had it all. Now she saw, they often have nothing. The main emotion flooding her was sorrow mixed with compassion. It wasn't disgust, not condemnation. It was heartbreak, the kind a mother feels when she sees her child self-destruct. And then Jesus' voice filled her, not through ears but through spirit. He has been given a gift. His music could have been light, but he chose to glorify himself. His pride has built a wall so high he cannot hear me. Pray for him, Lisa. His time is short. Lisa trembled. She had never prayed for a rock star. She had sung along to the songs on the radio, tapped her steering wheel to the rhythm, but she had never thought of the soul behind the sound. Now she understood. He was a man crafted by God, entrusted with a gift, yet consumed by the worship of millions. His hourglass was almost empty, and eternity was closer than he knew. The tidbit of knowledge pressed into her heart like a seed. Celebrity worship doesn't only destroy the star. It deceives the crowd. People pour their longing into fragile vessels, and when those vessels crack, thousands stumble with them. Lisa saw how the fall of one idol could ripple like an earthquake across millions of hearts who had tethered their hope to him. Her own soul quivered under the weight of what she had seen. She wanted to look away, but Jesus held her steady. His eyes carried grief deeper than oceans, yet within them she sensed an urgency. This was not hopelessness. It was a call. The musician still breathed, still had hours left on the clock. Prayer could break chains. Intercession could reach where applause never could. Lisa bowed in that vision, not before the man, but before the one who was showing her truth. She whispered in her soul, "Then I will pray." She knew she was only one woman, an ordinary nurse, but now she understood that prayer is never small when directed toward a great God. The vision dimmed, the roar of the stadium faded, and she stood once again in the light. But she knew another image was about to rise. The warning was not over. The next vision rose like a curtain lifting on a stage. Lisa found herself staring at a smiling face she knew well, though she had never met her. A woman, famous, radiant, adored by millions, stood under spotlights that made her seem untouchable. She was an actress, a household name, beloved for her comedies and charm. Families laughed with her in living rooms. Talk shows lit up with her laughter. To the world, she was joy itself. Lisa could almost hear the applause, the laughter echoing through theaters. The woman's face glowed with a smile so wide it seemed impossible to doubt its sincerity. Yet as the scene shifted, Jesus let Lisa see what cameras never showed. The lights dimmed. The audience vanished. The woman sat alone in a car parked in a dark garage, her shoulders shaking with sobs that racked her body. Her laughter had evaporated into weeping so deep it seemed to come from the marrow of her bones. The contrast pierced Lisa. She felt the actress's loneliness like a knife in her own chest. Surrounded by people who were paid to adore her, the woman's soul was starving. Lisa saw mascara-streaked cheeks pressed against a steering wheel, hands gripping it as if to keep from falling apart. For the cameras, she was America's sweetheart. In secret, she was collapsing. The emotion swelling inside Lisa was compassion. She had walked hospital halls at night, hearing muffled sobs behind closed curtains. But this despair was different. It was despair wrapped in fame, invisible because everyone assumed fame was enough. Jesus' voice came again, sorrowful and gentle. She makes the world laugh, but her own heart is broken. The applause cannot heal her. The world praises her for pretending, but no one knows who she truly is. Lisa's tears flowed as she realized how many had envied this woman's life, unaware of the unbearable weight behind the smile. She thought of how often she herself had watched movies or shows without pausing to consider the soul of the one performing. And now she knew. Idolatry blinds us not only to God, but to the humanity of the people we worship. Then came the tidbit of knowledge, quiet but sharp. The world's laughter cannot mend a single broken heart. Only the love of Christ can. Lisa saw it clearly. Fame is a mask, but Jesus sees beneath it. Success is a costume, but Jesus knows the soul underneath. Her compassion deepened into prayer. She longed to reach through the vision, to take the actress's hand and whisper, "You are seen. You are loved. There is hope." But the vision held her in stillness. This was not her mission to fix. It was her mission to carry, to remember, to tell. The garage faded, and Lisa stood again in the brightness of his presence. The tears on her cheeks glistened, but her heart understood. The warning was not only about those who stand in the spotlight. It was about everyone who believes the spotlight can save them. And before the peace could settle, another figure began to emerge. This one cloaked not in laughter, but in power. The brightness shifted again, and before Lisa stood a figure whose face was familiar from news headlines and glowing conference stages. A man of immense wealth, a titan of technology, hailed as a genius, a savior of the future. Crowds called him visionary, applauded his inventions, trusted his words more than they trusted scripture. He spoke of solving hunger, curing disease, and even conquering death. His voice carried authority, his mind dazzled, his power seemed limitless. To the world, he was unstoppable. But Jesus drew Lisa closer, peeling back the polished exterior. The stage dissolved, and she saw him alone in his glass mansion, the walls so sleek and clear they felt like ice. His eyes were sharp but hollow, his family distant shadows at the edges of his empire. She saw how coldly he spoke to them, his words cutting deeper than any scalpel. She saw how ruthlessly he crushed his rivals, building towers of ambition on the ruins of others' dreams. He did not pray, did not bow, did not consider heaven. He worshipped only himself. Lisa's heart clenched as she saw him pouring billions into research, searching for ways to cheat death itself. Machines, laboratories, endless files of data, all bent toward one goal: immortality without God. It was the Tower of Babel in silicon and steel. The man believed money could solve every riddle, even the riddle of eternity. But Lisa saw it. His foundation was sand, and a storm was gathering. The main emotion that filled her was dread, not of the man, but for him. Pride radiated from him like heat waves, the kind that scorches everything near. Jesus' voice vibrated through her spirit, grief-stricken. He has been given a mind to serve humanity, but he uses it only to serve himself. His pride grieves me most. He seeks to be his own God. Lisa trembled. She realized she had once admired men like this, envied their brilliance, wished she could achieve even a fragment of their influence. But now she saw the truth. Without God, brilliance becomes blindness. Wealth becomes shackles, power becomes poison. This man, celebrated by millions, was building monuments that eternity would scatter like dust. The tidbit of knowledge pressed into her heart was sharp as glass. No invention, no empire, no sum of money can purchase 1 second beyond the hour God has appointed. Humanity cannot buy eternity. It must receive it. Lisa knew then that every boast of human progress without God is nothing but a modern echo of Babel's pride, destined to fall. She longed to cry out, to warn him, to shake him from his delusion. But Jesus' sorrow held her silent. It was not her job to confront him. It was her job to testify, to tell the truth when she returned. She could pray, yes, but she could not alter what his pride had chosen. The storm was coming, and his towers would not stand. The vision began to fade, the billionaire's glass walls shattering into nothingness. Lisa was left breathless, trembling under the weight of what she had seen. The idols were not only falling, they were crumbling from within. Fame, laughter, power, each was an altar built on sand, and every altar built on sand would collapse. And then she was back before Jesus, his eyes still liquid love, but lined with unspeakable sorrow. She understood now. These visions were not for gossip, not for scandal, but for warning. He was preparing her to carry a message heavy enough to change lives. The visions dissolved like mist under the sun, and Lisa found herself again before the eyes of Jesus. His gaze did not condemn her, yet the sorrow remained, deeper now, woven with urgency. She realized that everything she had been shown, the musician, the actress, the billionaire, was not just about them. It was about the world, about all who had turned their eyes from heaven to fading lights on earth. The balcony returned, the earth spread out beneath them, cities flickering like restless embers. Lisa could feel it, the hum of misplaced worship rising from every corner of the globe. Stadiums thundering for athletes, theaters echoing with adoration for actors, conference halls swelling with applause for politicians and moguls. It was not wrong to honor talent, to respect leaders, to celebrate art. But she understood the difference now. Respect had been replaced with worship, admiration with idolatry. Humanity had forgotten its creator and was bowing to its own reflections. The main emotion overtaking her was clarity. It wasn't despair anymore, it was revelation. She saw with piercing sharpness how fragile it all was. The stars of earth burned bright, but quickly turned to ash. The idols the world adored were themselves broken, lonely, dying. And yet the crowds poured their hearts into them, blind to eternity. Then came the tidbit of knowledge, quiet but heavy. Every idol eventually falls, and when it does, those who trusted in it fall too. The collapse of the famous is not just their tragedy. It shakes the faith of those who built their hope upon them. That is why Jesus grieved. He wasn't weeping over celebrities alone. He was weeping for every soul chained to their rise and destined to stumble in their fall. Jesus' voice reached her spirit again, gentle yet firm. The message is not who will die. The message is that all will. The clock is ticking for every person. Lisa shuddered as eternity pressed against her like a wave too vast to measure. It wasn't only about musicians or actresses or billionaires. It was about neighbors, co-workers, families, herself. Every human being carried an hourglass, and the sand was slipping away. Her heart broke wide. She thought of Josh, her son, eyes glued to glowing screens, chasing heroes who could never save him. She thought of Mark, her husband, weary from work, sometimes looking for comfort in success rather than surrender. She thought of herself, bowing subtly to fear of bills, to the pressure of approval. The idols were not out there only. They had slipped into her own home, her own heart. And yet, mercy pulsed through the sorrow. Jesus' eyes told her that the warning was not despair, but invitation. The fall of false gods was not just judgment. It was mercy calling people back before it was too late. He wanted her to tell them, to shake them gently awake. Do not place your trust in what is dust. Do not tie your soul to dying stars. Lisa fell to her knees again, tears running freely. She whispered with her spirit, then I will tell them. I will not be silent. She knew the weight of what she promised, but she also knew the fire in her chest could not be contained. She had seen the truth. She had seen the emptiness of idols and the fullness of Christ. There was no going back to the way things had been. And yet she felt a tug, soft but insistent. The balcony began to fade, and the warmth of Jesus' love wrapped her again. She knew what it meant. Her time in his presence was drawing short. He had one more word for her, one final command that would send her back into the broken world she no longer wanted to face. The balcony dissolved, and Lisa stood once more before him, trembling. Every part of her wanted to stay in that golden light, in the gaze that stripped her bare and still clothed her with love. She longed to remain in the peace that had no end, in the joy that had no edge. She whispered in her spirit, please, let me stay. She felt the ache like a tearing inside her soul. To go back would be to trade heaven for a broken world, eternal harmony for hospital machines. Jesus smiled at her, but it was the kind of smile that holds sadness inside it. His eyes told her he understood, more than she could speak. His voice filled her, tender and unshakable. Your family still needs you. Mark and Josh are not ready. Your work is not finished. She shook her head, tears falling harder now, and confessed without words the exhaustion that had marked her years. She was tired of bills, tired of arguments, tired of watching sickness steal people one by one. But he looked at her with patience that reached into the marrow of her weariness and gave her strength she did not want, but could not refuse. He drew closer, his hand glowing softly, and she felt the touch without it landing. You have seen the truth, his presence spoke. Now you must carry it. You will walk among the fearful, and you will bring peace. Some will mock you. Some will call you foolish. But you will know what you saw, and I will be with you. The emotion in her heart twisted between grief and obedience. She didn't want to leave, but she loved him enough to obey. She thought of Josh, her boy, still young, still unsteady. She thought of Mark, who would carry burdens too heavy if she did not return. She realized then that love was not about where she wanted to be. Love was about giving herself where she was most needed. Then came a sensory detail that carved itself into her forever. Jesus leaned forward and pressed his light to her forehead. It felt like warm oil poured through her, flowing from crown to toes, every nerve saturated in fire and gentleness all at once. She gasped as love surged through her, then felt herself falling. The light faded, the velvet peace vanished, and the violent brightness of hospital lamps exploded around her. Pain stabbed her chest, her lungs burned, and voices shouted, "She's back." The tidbit of information settled inside her as she gasped for air. Her death had lasted 22 minutes. She should not have returned. By every medical measure, she should have been gone forever, brain-starved, heart-ruined. Yet she was alive, untouched by damage. It was a miracle, one her doctors could not explain. But she could. She had seen the reason. As days blurred in the hospital bed, her mission burned hotter. She no longer prayed out of habit. She prayed with fire, with urgency, with tears. She spoke to her patients not only about their charts, but about their souls, because she saw them now. Eternal souls, luminous to heaven, fragile to hell. Some rolled their eyes, but others wept with her, clutching her hand as if she were a lifeline. Lisa knew she was no longer only a nurse. She was a messenger. She had seen idols falling, seen the grief of God, seen the love that refuses to let go. Her story was not just her survival. It was her testimony. And with every breath, she promised she would not waste the second chance she had been given. And so, dear listener, you walk with Lisa back into the fragile world, carrying echoes of eternity in your chest. Her 22 minutes were not an accident. They were a summons, for her, for you, for all who hear this testimony. The message is clear. Heaven is real, Jesus is alive, and idols are crumbling. Fame cannot save. Money cannot buy eternity. Applause cannot mend a soul. Every star this world worships is burning out, but the light she saw will never fade. You may feel the weight of your own distractions even now, the small idols you polish without realizing, the voices you let guide your days more than his whisper. But this story calls you gently back. You are not unseen. You are not forgotten. You are loved more fiercely than your heart dares to believe. And though time is short, hope is not gone. It is alive, waiting for you to turn your gaze upward, away from dust, toward the one who gave you breath and will one day call you home. So take this moment. Let your heart soften. Let his love remind you that you matter, not because of wealth or status or fame, but because you are his child. And as this story closes, let it not be an ending, but a beginning. If these words resonate with you, please leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.